So the big question, Jonny, the question we set out to answer, is the new Spectral better than the old Spectral?
Well,
Jonny Matthews, welcome back to the Downtime Podcast, mate. Thanks for having me down for a day of bike riding.
always welcome.
Thank you. And before we dig into comparing the new Model Year 24 Spectral in the Mullet setup with the previous Spectral Mullet, maybe you should just remind us of the stuff that we've done in the past around that bike, because we did some good testing in 2022, I think, with the Spectral in its previous guys.
Feels like a long time ago now.
It probably was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, so we did the wheel size testing. So we had the 275, the full 275, the full 29, and then we had the Mullet. And we had ourselves and then a friend of yours, James, and we just went back to back on a single track and trying to determine whether wheel size did make a difference. And I think we concluded that it did have a difference, but we were more impressed with the overall capability of the bikes, I think.
Yeah, for sure. We did some timing as well and looked at what was quicker. If people want to check that out, then they can go back to those episodes and have a look.
And then we did the other test, which was the Spectral versus the Torque and the Strive.
We did.
And, they all had their benefits, but the Spectral still seemed to be one of the bikes that we preferred the most.
Yeah, it was kind of our overall winner out of those three as a generally great all-round bike, to the point where you went away and spent your hard-earned money on getting yourself a Spectral Mullet.
Yeah, 100%. It was so much fun to ride that I went and bought one and rode it a lot, taking it to the Alps. Amazing bike.
Yeah, you've had it about 18 months now, right?
Yeah, I got it middle of 22, was it?
Okay. Yeah, sounds about right. Yeah.
So,
and we'll start of 24. So
18 months.
Yeah, happy days. And I think both of us had a bit of a concern that the bike was so good before. Have they messed with it and ruined something? And I genuinely was nervous the first time I rode it, because I wanted to like it, but I was worried because it was so good. How do you improve that? And I was lucky enough to go to the Canyon launch, and they talked about, they knew the bike was good, they were happy with it, but they just felt there was some things they could improve. So they're not trying to totally remake the bike, reinvent it. They've just tried to refine what they've got, which is already good. We'll talk about what we did today. First, I guess some caveats on our day, which things that we couldn't, or broadly speaking, couldn't control. The first of those was the weather, which
was minging.
Yeah. Well, but the ride was good, eh?
Yeah, but when I woke up this morning and the heavens were opening, it was, this could be interesting.
Yeah, there was a lot of rain down, which meant the track was, to be fair, ran pretty well actually. But
yeah, the way we rode holds the water quite well, and it actually wasn't physically raining anymore, so which would have put a dampener on the day,
so to speak. Nice. But I think it takes a little bit of the feel away from what you're doing, and you're probably not pushing into the bike quite as much. So there's certain things that maybe we can't discern from that.
However, I would say that we were able to discern other things given how slippery and twitchy it was.
Yeah, for sure. We can talk about that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it helped in that side of things for sure. Bike setup wise, we're both on a medium. Both bikes are a medium, and we were swapping bikes between us. I've spent time on both the bikes in the past, so we focused the suspension setup more towards your weight, although we're not massively different, so we can both ride bikes that are pretty close. The new Spectral that we had a RockShox setup, which we're less familiar with than Fox. You've spent 18 months with that bike. I think you've had the shock tuned as well.
Yeah, and tweaking the forks to get them how I kind of like them and want them.
Yeah.
Which was, given various other episodes we've done, people won't be surprised to think that I spent a bit of time puzzling on that.
You're a bit of a tweaker. Yeah.
Pretty happy.
So and we had 10 minutes this morning to just get it set up for body weight and basic suspension positions. And also we're fairly convinced that there's some failure taking place in the rebound circuit on the fork on the new bike, which seemed to degrade throughout the day. Like the rebound damping seemed to go.
Yeah, we had to run it pretty much open so it wasn't an issue, which obviously had its issues.
But broadly speaking, we still managed to get through a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
We rode one track all day. We did 6 runs. It's a pretty long track in the UK style,
standards.
like not super steep, a couple of little steeper pitches, but not a super gnarly trail in that respect. A good mixture of like unsupported turns, supported turns, a couple of little jumps, some ruts, some braking bumps, some little drops.
Bit of speed.
Yeah, it's a couple of fast sections, a couple of less fast sections, a few large puddles, but not too bad.
It wasn't too bad.
So yeah, a good way to get to grips with the bike. And I was kind of pretty surprised at how easy it was to discern some of the differences. So we'll get stuck into that. And I think what I wanted to do with you today was to not tell you what had changed on the bike and let you ride it. We had the opposite experience on the Canyon launch where we were told about the changes and then went and ride it, which could potentially cloud your thoughts, or I just thought it'd be interesting for you. And when I said to you, you were like, oh, I'm not an expert, I don't know what these measurements were, but give me some thoughts on what you think is different, and then we'll talk through what is actually different and some of the numbers.
Okay, so the obvious one was the stack height was bigger. Mm-hmm. It felt like the reach was slightly longer.
Yeah.
I think, well, we cheated a little bit and we put the bikes up against each other. I think the wheelbase is pretty similar.
Yeah.
But then in my head, I'm like, well, if the reach is a bit longer, they've got to kind of take that away from somewhere. However, like manualing and wheeling, it felt pretty similar. So I wouldn't say that the chain stays were much longer. I do think the bottom bracket is lower.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
Because I clipped my pedals a couple of times on the new one, and I didn't clip it on the other one.
Okay, fair play. Could be suspension setup.
Yeah.
Potentially, like if we had a bit more sag or whatever.
My setup is superior.
Yeah. So the reach on the Mullet that you have is 456.
Yeah.
If I told you the reach on the bike we rode today was 475, would you be shocked?
It was longer. It felt longer.
Yeah.
Maybe not that much, but
19 mil longer.
That's quite a lot.
When they sent me, so before we went on the launch, they were like, what size bike do you need? And they sent me the reach number. And I was like, I'm not sure. I've generally struggled with bikes much longer than sort of 460 odd, 465. And I would almost size down to a small, but I was like,
I don't think it was a problem though, was it?
No, it wasn't, which really surprised me. Like, it doesn't feel as reachy as that number suggests. Like, normally with a bike that is that long, I've struggled to keep the front end in check and I feel like I'm going to lose it, but I don't on that.
So what was the head angle?
The head angle on both is the same, 64.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So seat angle stays the same, head angle stays the same.
Yeah.
Reach is the biggest change. So what Canyon have done
felt that going up, like that was noticeable riding uphill.
Yeah, the cockpit's more roomy. Yeah, for sure. You just get on the bike, you can tell it's longer.
And we had the same bars on and all of that jazz. So that was quite fair.
But I genuinely thought I was going to struggle to keep the front end in check, and I've somehow on that bike I've not felt it.
Yeah.
Which might be, so the stack is 6 mil higher on the new bike. So it's a combination of various things, I think. But for some reason at 475, that bike worked for me, which was was a surprise.
Yeah, and like some other characters in the mountain bike industry who have been pushing for longer bikes. It kind of makes sense. And so,
yeah, interesting. Chainstay length?
I think it was about the same.
Yeah, it's 3 mil shorter actually in the Mullet setup on that bike. So ballpark pretty similar, which I think it will help keep that sort of playful element to it.
So the wheelbase is slightly longer then?
The wheelbase will be slightly longer. Yeah, because same head angle but more reach. Yeah. What impact did they go on?
Bottom and the bottom bracket height?
I don't have that to hand. I think it is a touch lower on so it's 33 on the old bike offset, and bottom bracket offset is 36 on the new bike, so it's slightly lower.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But 3 mil. But that can be enough, right? And if you're running, perhaps we had a little more sag on that bike than dynamic sag than because obviously we're only measuring static sag, not dynamic sag. So yeah, could have been something to do with that. But again, stuff that you could, I guess, play with and tweak.
You know, we're splitting hairs here. It wasn't an issue.
Yeah.
You know, you just asked me what were the differences.
Yeah,
I'm like,
totally.
oh, well, actually.
What do you think those, certainly the reach change, what impact would you say that had on the bike for you?
Stability. You know, that was the one thing, the more noticeable difference between the two was the stability of the bike. It was definitely more planted in corners. And I think one of the things I liked about like my bike is how playful it was compared to the full 29er.
Yeah.
And it definitely felt like you were sitting more in the bike than the 29er.
Yeah, you were on the bike on the 29er.
Yeah, exactly. And I think overall the 29er might have been quicker just because of the inherent benefits of the bigger wheels. But just for like a day-to-day fun, playful bike, I think the Mullet was the better bike from that respect. Mm-hmm. However, here they seem to have been able to take, you know, certain elements of the stability of the full 29er and apply it to the Mullet, and you're still in the bike, but I think that extra length has just added that element of stability to it. Whether it would take away an element of the playfulness, I don't know. It didn't. If you know, it's one of these balancing acts of playfulness versus stability. And on a day like today, where it was slippy and you know we were all over the place, you know, that element of stability just made riding it easier. Not that, you know, I didn't have fun on my other bike, but it was definitely noticeable, that difference between the two bikes.
It was really noticeable, especially the first time I switched between the two. So I rode the new bike first, the 24 model year bike first, and then rode your bike, the outgoing model, and it felt so twitchy. And it's not, and it took, once I got used to that bike, it felt better, but it's still not as stable and as kind of confidence inspiring as that newer version. And I don't know how they've kind of extended the bike that much and made it feel still like I can ride it. I don't feel like it's too long for me, which is
it's good.
Clever.
Yeah.
But they've done that. They've basically evened out the gaps between the frame sizes.
Do you think that's where the stack height comes in? Like
potentially
you've gone up and back.
Yeah, so your actual like effective reach of the cockpit length
isn't
not
actually that
as pronounced. Yeah. I'm sure there's something that I don't fully understand there that's happening for sure.
But it's good.
Yeah,
like, what they've done is good.
Yeah, and it's evened out the gaps between the frame sizing now. So there were some strange leaps, and I think the medium is one of the bikes that's moved further. So some of the other frame sizes won't necessarily have grown as much as the medium has. But again, if you didn't want the bike at that length, you could size down to the small. And away you go.
I also like how they've gone and they've kind of consolidated the range, and they've kind of focused on the Mullet, which of the Spectral range, that I thought that was the best bike. And they've now incorporated that element into every single model, because you can change you've
got the flip chip.
Yeah,
it's super neat. So yeah, when we tested the bikes on the last one, there was a 275, a 29 and a Mullet, which is incredible commitment from a brand to carry all of those parts and all of those elements. They've refined it down now, and they've put a flip chip into the chainstay, which you can just turn around and it changes the bike from a Mullet to 29. Obviously you need to change the wheel, but and keeps basically everything identical, apart from, I believe, it becomes slightly more progressive with the Mullet in, which you probably want anyway, because you're getting a bit more, you're not rolling over as easy, you're hitting things a bit harder with the back wheel. So it's super cool. Yeah. And I think you can choose at checkout which wheel size you
when you buy
want,
the bike,
I think. And if you want to have the extra wheel as well, then you can get
add that on.
So say you I like riding a Mullet most of the time, but if I'm going to go race, I might want to put a 29er wheel in just for that bit of extra rollover. Then 2 chips and a different wheel, in you go, and away you go. So yeah, it's pretty cool. It's quite impressive. We're talking about stability. Canyon have made a pretty bold move, I would say. So a while ago, they launched the Keep It Stable, the K.I.S system, which is a sprung steering stabilizer that sits within the top tube and wraps around the fork steerer, and basically wants to bring the steering back to straight. It wants to keep the bike in a straight line. I think we're both fairly similarly minded that we were a bit concerned that might be a gimmick.
Yes.
And maybe more like of a, I don't know, a marketing hype thing than an engineering led thing. And having ridden it today, I think both of us have had our minds change like quite dramatically on it. I
100% thought it was a bit of a gimmick, and having been aware of what a steering dampener is in the motocross world.
Well, this is a steering stabilizer, not dampers, to be fair, but yeah.
Okay. However, that was my benchmark of what I understood in that kind of realm. It was so it's got 3 settings.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, it's infinitely variable, but we only ran it in the middle, the lowest and the highest. Yeah.
Just as so it came, and so immediately you get on the bike and it feels, stable, which for me, I was like, yes, it's the reach is obviously a big factor there. But then towards the end, we went fully well, the minimum.
Yeah.
And then did another run and put it to the maximum. And the difference was noticeable.
Yeah. How would you describe what you feel like that system was doing for you?
So putting it on full, kind of like bracketing the kissing, was a good thing to do, because what it meant was when it was on full, if you were, say, riding an unsupported off-camber corner, the confidence and the speed which you could carry on that type of corner was really, really pronounced. Or when you were in a rut, and there was quite a few ruts today.
Yeah.
However, when you were, say, going fast, or going fast in a straight line where you would make minute adjustments, that was harder because you had to actually put more input than you would think you needed at that speed.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And the same at the slower speeds. It's, sometimes it's only now that I've, thought about it, that sometimes when you're riding, it's just these tiny movements that you actually use. And if say on a trail there's a very specific line or gap or that you want to place your wheel, I miss those.
Okay.
Because you have hitting that precise movement. Yeah. Whereas in the middle setting, I didn't find, I think the middle setting was that compromise between the two. Mm-hmm. Now, that's not to say that if you spent more time on the bike, you just get used to that increased input that was required, and then you get the benefits the rest of the time. But it was, I was surprised actually.
I think at that point we'd probably gone, unless you're consciously making trade-offs, we'd probably gone too far for your bar width, strength, setup, etc. So I asked the Canyon guys, like, how are you going to educate people on this? Like, what's the instruction manual going to tell you to do? And their view was, well, you start off in the lowest setting, like the weakest spring, effectively the least amount of force pulling you back straight. Ride it, get used to it, and then you gradually increase. You could just go all the way up if you wanted, but you gradually increase until you get to the point where you start to feel some of those things, like I can't quite move it like I want to, or I can't get it into a turn, it wants to stand up, kind of thing. Then you know that you've gone that little step too far and you just back it off a notch and away you go. But maybe once you do get used to it, you could make, especially if you're at a race.
I've got a race in my head where it would have been amazing.
Well, we were talking about this earlier, right? So Ridder fell in nationals when it was just a muddy rut the whole way down the track, pretty much. Like,
it would have, I think made quite a difference on that track.
It's amazing how, it helps keep the bike straight in the rut and you're not getting like thrown about and stuff.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's like, in a rut, all it takes is your weight to be a little bit off and you compensate and your tire catches either side of the rut. And I think in this instance, it just helps that not to happen.
Yeah, it's trying to keep the bike in a straight line, basically. It saves you getting that bit of a swap on. Or
so something so simple is so effective.
I think it changed both of our perspectives pretty quickly, actually, which did surprise me. It did.
And you were like, well, is the stability, is that the geo of the bike, or is it the K.I.S? I'm like, no, it's not the K.I.S.
But
I think it was a contributing factor, for sure.
It was a percentage.
Given that we turned it off and turned it on again. So.
Yeah, and you can take it out if you don't want to have it in the bike. The bike comes with a blanking plate, so if you do, for any reason, not get on with it. But I can't.
I wouldn't take it
I
off.
don't think there's any negatives to it, really.
No.
I mean, it doesn't weigh very much. Canyon have managed to put it in at no price increase. I don't know how they've managed to do that, but they have. So
It's cool.
win-win, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair and impressive. Like, I think it's quite a bold move from a brand to put a brand new piece of technology in like that across the board. So
Yeah.
fair play.
Want one for my dad? Like,
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Would you be surprised if I told you that bike had 10 mil less travel than yours?
at the back or the front?
Front and back.
I wouldn't. Not surprised.
Okay.
It felt like I said that it, and I would kind of put it down to the fact that I had a coil on the back.
Yeah.
But I'm not surprised.
Interesting. I'm wondering if with more suspension setup time on the new bike, you could get to the point where they felt closer, because I didn't feel that I was on a lesser travel bike on that new Spectral. I must have, but I know you were saying you felt like it was quite chattery coming through the rougher stuff. But
Yeah, I now you mention it, I'm like, well, yeah, that could have been one of the reasons why I felt a difference.
could be part of it for sure.
But the suspension platforms were very different, and we're talking about something that I've spent a lot of time setting up, as opposed to something we would just had out of the box. So
Yeah.
it's hard to make that judgment
For sure.
on a
One trail in the mud. Yeah.
on an equal playing field. If we'd have swapped my suspension on, I don't know.
Who knows? More work to be done. Maybe we can get some bikes again and have a play. But yeah, so they've gone.
Is that that bike only, or is that across the entire range?
That's all the Spectrals.
All the Spectrals got the same.
Yeah. So it's 150 front, 140 rear, and it was 160 front, 150 rear.
Yeah, okay.
The reason being is they want to pull them away from like the Strive and the other bikes in the range to make it a bit more clear where people might want to spend their money. So it's very much.
I didn't feel slower.
Bike.
Like I didn't feel slower on it.
I don't think you were.
So
yeah, no, but interestingly, and they have changed the kinematic. So they've made the bike more linearly progressive this time around. The intention being like it should have a bit more support. I don't think that's something for me. It's not something I was able to feel in the riding I've done on it yet, purely because it's been sloppy and wet, and you're not like attacking turns and smashing through stuff. I'd like to ride it where I can
push it
a little bit more. But yeah, apparently they've smoothed out that, which also makes the bike just a little bit more predictable. Like wherever in the stroke you are, you kind of know what it's going to do. It's not doing anything funny, which is kind of cool. They've reduced the anti-squat a little bit, which is the force that resists the pedaling of the bike. So in theory, it might be a little bit more likely to move when you're pedaling. I think I'm getting this right. But
just beyond my pay grade.
It should climb better. So the reduction in travel and then the lower anti-squat means that it's more likely to move out of the way. Like if you're climbing and you're getting over roots and stuff, then it should be a little more supple off the top.
It's a bit hard, I guess, because we were mainly riding back up on a fire road, so 100%. We probably wouldn't have noticed that.
Yeah, so I think the changes there were kind of hard for us to ascertain, really. Another thing they changed, again, I don't think we really massively felt, but you will have noticed one of the benefits of today. They've softened the rear end of the bike. They made it more supple, more flexing. Yeah. So their belief was that the old rear end could feel a little bit harsh on occasion. They liked the stiffness of the front end. They weren't so keen on the stiffness of the rear. So they've made that more laterally flexible. They've stiffened the linkage between the rear end and the front of the bike, made it one piece. Which means you're not getting any kind of strange loading on the shock and creating wear problems or issues there, stiction. I definitely didn't feel like it had a floppy rear end, so to speak, but again, we weren't pushing super hard. Would you say you noticed anything along those lines yet? I think given the right track on the right conditions, you might, but one of the benefits of slimming down that rear end is increased heel clearance.
Which was definitely a benefit for me, my Charlie Chaplin face. So.
Yeah, you do mark every bike you ride with your heels. Generally, you have to put a bit of thick tape on them.
Yeah, you've definitely pointed that out in the past when I've marked up some bike with been
borrowed for
the day.
Yeah. So that was good. We didn't have any heel rub for you, which is unusual, I think.
Yeah, it's very. I don't think I've had a bike that's not had heel rub. So that's good.
Yeah, happy days. And then a few other bits and bobs where they've, again, just made like nice incremental improvements to the bike, I guess. So in-frame storage is becoming more and more of a must-have thing. I think they've done quite a nice job in it.
It's neat. Yeah, you don't notice it.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
And they've got a nice bag that like tucks away so you can get tubes and bits and bobs. I believe there's a rain jacket coming as well, which will fit in there, which is pretty
cool.
impressive. We talked about the Mullet flip chip, which I think is super cool. Nice, neat bit of design.
Just solid idea.
Yeah, they've still got the high-low flip chip. So if you wanted to increase that bottom bracket height by a couple of mil, you can do that. And I think it takes like half a degree off the head angle or something like that. So they were saying a few of their like ambassador pro rider kind of people prefer it. Like in the areas they ride, they want that little bit more clearance. So they like that. What else have they done? So
the mud flaps at the rear.
Yeah, the counter rotating mud flaps neat, hey? Because you've got this, the old one didn't have any coverage there, and you can get dirt and grit and little stones in there, and it can, if you're not careful, like can it potentially eat away at things.
Yeah.
But yeah, they've got a piece on the swing arm and a piece on the seat tube that counter rotate around each other, never touch, and just keep all the mud out, which is
just a neat idea, another neat idea.
Yeah.
Really good.
Pretty nice. They've got, they've increased the post drop on most of the models, I think. So there's more standover. The actual like seat tower is lower on all the bikes. They've got full drop posts, full insertion posts across everything, which is pretty impressive. So for me and you, I've never had a bike that a 200mm dropper fits on at my height on a medium. So that was a nice touch. And again, they've done all the maths to make sure that the rear, even in the lowest possible, the rear tire doesn't buzz on the saddle, which is pretty cool, which is why the extra small only comes in Mullet, because if you put a 29er rear in the extra small,
it'll buzz.
But pretty cool that they did the maths on that. They tidied up the stem, new G5 stem.
Yeah, that was neat.
Move the bolts out of the way so you're not going to hit them with your knees, that kind of stuff. Improve the cable routing and the cable ports a little bit, just neatened all that stuff up. But nothing else major. But like aesthetically, I'd say it looks pretty similar.
I think, given it was under, I want to say Umbongo, but it's not, it's embargo. I think if somebody had spotted us on it, they wouldn't have noticed.
Yeah.
It's just looks very similar. They've just taken something good and refined it. And I think they've obviously listened to us talk about it in the past, because they've definitely incorporated some element, but it's just a good bike. Just a good bike.
I think the first run you did on it, you were like, it's a Canyon.
Yeah, I can just get on these bikes at first run and ride them at a fast pace. I don't need to get used to them. And that was the case when we did the wheel size stuff. There was just solid, predictable bikes. Really good.
Yeah, easy to ride.
Really easy to ride.
Yeah, easy to ride fast as well, especially that newer one. There's definitely...
the speed there.
I think everyone would find that easier to ride faster than the older one, effectively, because it's just that bit of confidence in the fact that it's not quite as twitchy, it's a bit more stable. Like comparing those two today, in my head at least, it felt, your bike, the outgoing model, felt a little bit more like the 275 when we were comparing it to the Mullet or the 29er back in those tests, in that it was just that little bit more feel through the bike, a little bit twitchier, a little bit more kind of unsettling, whereas this felt like pretty calm for the most part, especially considering the conditions. Like it was,
and I think the new one really played into those conditions where the grip's a bit more inconsistent. We were doing there were some really tight lines off camber, and the grip that you could hold on the new bike was really good. I remember giggling to myself a couple of times.
And the pricing they managed to hit, I would say, pretty impressive. Like it's basically the same price as the outgoing bike with all those improvements in there. So
I know, good effort, especially in today's climate. It's stick something out at the same price with as good kit on it. It's impressive.
Yeah, I was pretty surprised when they emailed the pricing through, actually. Like I wasn't expecting to see it at the same level as the outgoing stuff. So they've done a nice job. All right, so the big question, Jonny, the question we set out to answer, is the new Spectral better than the old Spectral?
Well, I think it is. It's there's definitely some advantages. It's not so good that I'd want to just trade mine in. I think mine is a heck of a bike still.
I would agree.
And it's that playful element is something I like. But if I was in the same position again and I didn't have that bike, I'd probably go out and buy this bike. It's really, really good. It's just not only is it another solid bike by Canyon, it's got this added flexibility to it, and the stability is really good. I'd want to spend more time on it, basically.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. But yeah, hats off to Canyon. I think we both were concerned that they were going to take something great and mess with it, and they have messed with it. But everything they've messed with seems to be an improvement.
They've kept that. And it'd be interesting to stick it in the 29 and to see whether you have that like on the bike feeling as opposed to in the bike, and to see how the added reach changes the 29er setup. Because if it maybe feels like you're still more in the bike with that reach, the full 29er actually might be really good.
I hate to think how fast the full 29er is.
Like, it would be definitely worth a go in the full 29 setup. It could be an absolute rocket ship.
Nice. Let's see if I can get a 29er rear wheel. We can go
Canyon.
Go riding again. Nice one. Thanks, mate. Well, it was an absolute pleasure. It was fun to go and get very muddy in the slot with you today and ride some bikes.
Wicked.
Cheers, mate.